Welcome to Almost Alone. Tonight we're talking about college dorms, places designed for community, for safety in numbers, for being surrounded by people your own age at all hours of the day and night. But proximity doesn't always mean protection. Sometimes the crowd is exactly what makes you invisible. Sometimes being surrounded by hundreds of people just means there are more ways for someone to blend in, more reasons for others to assume someone else is paying attention, more noise to cover up the sounds that matter. The two stories you're about to hear both take place in dorm buildings. Both involve people who thought they were safe because they were never truly alone. Both learned that the real danger isn't isolation, it's the illusion of security. If these stories resonate with you, consider subscribing. It helps more people find the channel. And if you want to share your own experience, you can submit it through the link in the description. Let's begin. I'm 26 now, but when I was 19, I learned that living alone doesn't always mean what you think it means. This happened during my sophomore year of college. I was living in Fletcher Hall, a 6-story brick building on the east side of campus, one of the older dorms, with narrow hallways and rooms that smelled faintly of decades-old paint and cleaning solution. I'd started the year with a roommate, but she dropped out in October after deciding college wasn't for her. By the time November rolled around, housing hadn't reassigned anyone to fill the empty bed, and I wasn't complaining. Having a single room felt like winning the lottery. More space. No compromises about when the lights went off or who got the desk near the window. The building used keycard access, standard for most dorms on campus. You tapped your card on the reader, the light turned green, and the lock clicked open. Simple, secure, or so I thought. For the first few weeks after my roommate left, everything was normal. I settled into the rhythm of living alone. I could study whenever I wanted, keep my schedule exactly how I liked it, leave my things out without worrying about someone else's mess overlapping with mine. But then I started noticing small things. Nothing dramatic, nothing I could point to and say, this is wrong. Just inconsistencies. The first time, it was my towel. I came back from my 9 a.m. biology lecture, dropped my bag on the bed, and went to wash my hands. My towel was damp, not soaked, just slightly wet, like someone had used it recently and hung it back up. I stood there staring at it, trying to remember if I'd showered that morning. I had. I was sure I had. But maybe I'd forgotten to check the towel before I left. Maybe I was just tired and misremembering. I dried my hands on it and didn't think about it again. A week later, I noticed my shampoo bottle was nearly empty. I'd bought it at the start of the semester, a big bottle, the kind that's supposed to last months. By mid-November, it was almost gone. I stared at it, running the numbers in my head. That didn't make sense. I didn't use that much. But then again, maybe I did. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. Maybe I was using more than I realized. Little things like that kept happening. A granola bar wrapper in the trash that I didn't remember eating. My desk chair pulled slightly away from the desk when I was certain I'd pushed it in before leaving for class. My laptop at a different angle. Each time I found a reason, I was stressed. Midterms were coming. I wasn't sleeping well. I was forgetting small details because my brain was fried from studying. But the unease kept building. Then, one afternoon in early December, I came back from the library and froze the moment I stepped into my room. My bed was made. Not the way I'd left it. Messily pulled up, blanket half draped over the pillow. It was made neatly, professionally. The corners tucked the way hotels do it. Tight, precise, like someone who'd done it many times before. I never made my bed like that. I stood in the doorway, heart beating faster than it should have, staring at the bed like it was something foreign. Maybe housekeeping had come in. That happens sometimes, right? Random room inspections, maintenance checks. But there was no notice on my door, no slip saying they'd entered. I checked with my RA later that day. She said no one from housing had been in my room. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound. The heat clicking on, footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing on other floors. My mind kept circling back to the same question. If no one from housing had been in my room, then who made my bed? The next morning, I made a decision. I had an old laptop, one I'd replaced the year before but kept around for backup. I set it up on the bookshelf across from my bed, angled so the camera had a clear view of the door and most of the room. I downloaded a free motion detection app and left it running. If something was happening, I'd have proof. That day, I had back-to-back classes from 10 a.m. until 2 in the afternoon. When I got back to my room, I pulled up the recording app and scrolled through the footage. For the first hour, nothing. Just an empty room. Stillness. Then, at 11:47 a.m., the door opened. A man stepped inside. He wasn't a student. At least he didn't look like one. Mid-30s maybe. Average height. Wearing jeans and a gray hoodie. Completely unremarkable. The kind of person you'd walk past on the sidewalk and forget immediately. He used a key card. I watched him tap it against the reader, heard the quiet beep, saw the door click open like it was the most natural thing in the world. He stepped in, closed the door behind him, and stood there for a moment, looking around. Then he walked to the bathroom. I heard the shower turn on. I sat frozen, staring at the screen, my stomach twisting into something cold and tight. He stayed in the shower for maybe 10 minutes. When he came out, he walked to my mini fridge, opened it, and made himself a sandwich using my bread, my deli meat, my cheese. He ate slowly, casually, sitting at my desk like he had all the time in the world. When he was finished, he threw the wrapper in my trash, wiped his hands on my towel, and walked over to my bed. He lay down, not on top of the covers, under them. He pulled the blanket over himself, rested his head on my pillow, and stared at the ceiling for several minutes. Then he got up, smoothed the blanket, tucked the corners, and left. The whole thing took 23 minutes. My hands went numb. I had to set the laptop down because I couldn't hold it steady. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't me imagining things. This was real. Someone had been coming into my room, using my shower, eating my food, lying in my bed. I scrolled back through the app's saved motion alerts from the previous week. He'd been coming for weeks, twice a week, sometimes 3 times. Always during my longest class block, always when he knew I'd be gone. Most of the visits were short. He'd shower, eat something, use my desk. But there were others that made my skin crawl. In one clip, he stood at my closet and went through my clothes, just looking. He held my sweatshirt up to his face for several seconds before hanging it back. In another, he sat on my bed and scrolled through his phone, completely at ease, like this was his room and not mine. But the worst one, the one I almost couldn't finish watching, was from a week earlier. He came in at 2 a.m. I was asleep. The footage showed him standing at the foot of my bed, completely still, just watching me. He didn't move, didn't make a sound. He stood there for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Then he stepped closer. Twice. Once his hand moved toward the bed, stopped inches from my arm, then pulled back. Then he left. I couldn't breathe. I sat there watching the empty room on the screen, trying to process what I'd just seen. I called campus police immediately. They took the footage, asked me questions I could barely answer, and told me to wait in the RA's office while they reviewed everything. An officer came back 20 minutes later. They'd identified him. A former maintenance worker for campus housing, someone who'd been let go 8 months earlier after budget cuts. He'd kept a cloned key card and had been using it to access buildings ever since. They found him in the parking lot behind Fletcher Hall an hour later. In his car, they found 6 more cloned key cards. His laptop was open on the passenger seat, showing a spreadsheet. Rows and columns, names, room numbers, class schedules, days of the week blocked out in color-coded cells. My name was highlighted in yellow. Next to it, Tuesdays and Thursdays 10 to 2, Fridays 11 to 3. Room empty. Always locks door but doesn't use deadbolt. He'd been tracking students, learning their routines, visiting their rooms when he knew they'd be gone. The detective told me later that I wasn't the first. They estimated he'd been doing this for at least a year, rotating between buildings, moving carefully so no one noticed. Some students never knew. Others noticed strange things, like I had, but convinced themselves they were imagining it. I moved to a different dorm the next day, a newer building with better security. I requested a room on an upper floor with a roommate. I didn't want to be alone anymore. People asked me later if I ever felt safe again, if I ever stopped thinking about it. The answer is no. Because here's the thing no one tells you. Once you know someone can walk into your life that easily, once you've seen footage of a stranger standing over you while you sleep, deciding whether tonight would be the night he did more than watch, you don't forget. The lock on my current apartment has 3 deadbolts. My landlord thinks I'm paranoid, but he's never watched footage of a stranger lying in his bed, using his shower, eating his food. He's never had to wonder how many times it happened before he finally noticed. I have. And I still don't know the answer. But sometimes I wonder. On those nights he stood over my bed at 2 a.m., was he deciding whether to wake me? Or was he just practicing for the night he finally would? I'm 24 now, but when I was 20, I used to think the safest place to study late was in a building full of people. I was wrong. This happened during my junior year. I was living off campus by then, a small apartment about 15 minutes from school, but I still spent a lot of time in the dorms. The library closed at midnight, and I had a terrible habit of starting assignments too late and needing somewhere quiet to work into the early hours. One of my friends still lived in Kramer Hall, an 8-story dorm on the south edge of campus with a 24-hour study lounge on the second floor. She'd usually let me in when I texted, or I'd just wait by the entrance until someone came out and catch the door. The building wasn't strict about access. Students came and went at all hours, and as long as you looked like you belonged, no one questioned it. It felt safe. There were always people around. RAs doing rounds, students moving between floors, security cameras in every hallway. I started going there 2 or 3 nights a week, usually between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., depending on how much work I had. The lounge itself was nothing special. A long room with floor-to-ceiling windows on one side, a few couches, some study tables, vending machines in the corner, fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly if you paid attention. Most nights, there were a handful of other students scattered around, headphones in, laptops open, everyone locked into their own world. For the first few weeks, it was exactly what I needed. Quiet, productive, no distractions. Then I started noticing him. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Just another person in the building. Mid-30s maybe. Jeans, plain jacket, nothing that stood out. He'd be sitting on one of the couches near the vending machines, or standing in the hallway by the stairs, phone in hand like he was waiting for someone. But he was always there. Not in the same spot, that would have been too obvious, but somewhere, on the periphery, close enough that I'd see him if I glanced up from my laptop. After about 2 weeks, I started paying more attention. I realized he wasn't a student. He was too old, and he wasn't studying. He didn't have books or a laptop, just his phone, which he'd hold loosely in one hand, staring at the screen but not really scrolling, like he was pretending. And he was there every night I was, not most nights, every night, different floors, different spots, but always present. It started to bother me in a way I couldn't explain. I'd look up from my work and catch him across the room, standing near the water fountain or sitting in a corner chair. He never looked directly at me, never made eye contact, but I could feel it, the awareness, the attention. One night, I mentioned it to another student who studied there regularly, a guy I'd seen around a few times. We were both grabbing coffee from the vending machine, and I said casually, "Do you know that guy who's always hanging around here late? Older, usually wearing a jacket?" He looked at me confused. "What guy?" I gestured vaguely toward the hallway. "He's here like every night. I figured he must work here or something." "I've never noticed anyone like that," he said. That made it worse, because if he hadn't noticed, that meant the guy wasn't always there. He was only there when I was. A few nights later, I worked up the nerve to take a photo. I waited until he was standing near the stairwell, pretending to look at his phone. I angled my laptop screen like I was adjusting something and took a quick picture with my phone under the desk. Blurry, but clear enough. The next day, I showed it to my friend Rachel, the one who lived in Kramer Hall. I tried to keep my tone light. "Do you know this guy? I keep seeing him around your building." Her face changed immediately. "When did you take this?" "Last night." "Why?" She pulled me into an empty study room and closed the door. "That's..." She stopped like she wasn't sure how to say it. "That guy was arrested 2 years ago. A girl in this building. He figured out her schedule, where she parked, what route she took to class. He tried to get into her room one night. She woke up and screamed. If she hadn't..." Rachel didn't finish the sentence. "He got banned from every building on campus. He's not allowed in any dorm. He shouldn't be here." My stomach dropped. "He's been there every night I've been there." Rachel's expression went from concerned to alarmed. She grabbed her phone and called campus police. While we waited for them to arrive, I went back through my calendar, checking every night I'd studied in Kramer Hall over the past month. He'd been there every single time. Not randomly, not coincidentally. He was tracking my schedule. Campus police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers, both taking it seriously the moment Rachel showed them the photo. They asked when I'd last seen him. I told them less than an hour ago. They searched the building floor by floor while I waited in Rachel's dorm room, door locked, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. They didn't find him, but when they checked the security footage, they saw him leave through a side exit minutes after Rachel made the phone call. Later, when they reviewed more footage, they found something that made my blood run cold. The footage showed him in the hallway 1 floor down from where Rachel and I had been talking, phone in his hand. He'd been close enough to hear us through the stairwell door. He knew we'd called the police. That's why he left. One of the officers asked where I was parked. I told him I didn't drive. My apartment was close enough to walk. He asked for my address. His expression shifted when I said it. "Stay here," he said. 20 minutes later, he came back. They'd found his car in the visitor parking lot near the building. Inside, on the passenger seat, were printed photos. Photos of me, walking to the building, sitting in the study lounge, laptop open, headphones in, leaving through the side door at 2 a.m., backpack slung over one shoulder. There were dozens of them. In some of them, I was so close the camera must have been just a few feet away. In one, taken through the study lounge window, you could see my laptop screen reflected in the glass. He'd been standing outside, watching what I was working on. His phone was unlocked on the passenger seat, open to a calendar app. My study schedule was mapped out. Days of the week color-coded, times noted in military format. Each night I'd been there had a green check mark next to it. Future dates had question marks. At the bottom of the calendar in the notes section, walks home alone, doesn't look around, headphones in. My off-campus address was saved in his GPS history. The officer told me they were setting up surveillance over the next week. They expected him to come back. People like that usually do. They don't stop unless they're forced to. 6 days later, he came back. They arrested him in the parking lot before he even got out of his car. I never learned his name. I didn't want to. What I did learn from the detective who called me a week later was that he'd been sneaking into campus buildings for months, piggybacking through entrance doors behind students, blending in, moving between floors. No one noticed because no one thought to notice. He'd been following me for at least 6 weeks, possibly longer, long enough to know my habits, long enough to learn which nights I'd be there and which routes I took home. The detective said most stalkers escalate slowly. They test boundaries, study routines, build confidence, then they make a move. I asked what he thought would have happened if they hadn't caught him. He didn't answer directly. He just said, I'd made the right call by reporting it. I withdrew from 2 of my classes that semester and finished the rest online. I never went back to Kramer Hall. I stopped studying late at night anywhere on campus. People asked me why I'd give up my junior year like that, why I'd let one creepy guy derail everything. But they didn't see the photos in his car. They didn't see how many there were, how detailed, how recent. And they didn't see that the most recent ones, taken just 3 days before he was arrested, were shot from inside my apartment building's parking garage. He knew where I lived. I thought about it afterward, recontextualizing everything I dismissed. That night I thought I heard footsteps behind me walking home and kept turning around, but no one was there. He was there. The car I saw idling near my building that I thought was a rideshare waiting, that was him. The feeling of being watched that I kept dismissing as paranoia. I was right. I'd sensed him. I just hadn't listened. The detective told me later that they found saved addresses in his phone for 4 other women, all students, all with similar patterns, studying alone late at night, walking home in the dark. 2 of them had never noticed him at all. One had reported a weird guy to campus security, but nothing came of it. I was the only one who took a photo. Sometimes I think about those other women, whether they know how close they came, whether they still study late at night, still walk home alone, still trust that a building full of people means safety. I don't anymore. Because I learned that predators don't hide in dark alleys waiting to jump out. They sit on couches in well-lit buildings. They stand in hallways with their phone out. They follow you from a distance, learning your patterns, waiting for the exact right moment when you're vulnerable and alone. And they count on you telling yourself you're being paranoid, that it's nothing, that you're overreacting. I almost did. I almost talked myself out of reporting him, and if I had, I don't think I'd be here at all. That's the end of tonight's episode. 2 people, 2 dorm buildings. Both of them thought safety came from being surrounded by others. Both learned that proximity doesn't equal protection. Sometimes the crowd is exactly what makes predators invisible. Sometimes the noise is what covers up the warning signs. Sometimes being in a building with hundreds of people just means there are more ways for someone to slip through unnoticed. If tonight's episode resonated with you, I'd appreciate it if you'd take a moment to like the video or leave a comment. If you have your own story you'd like to share, you can submit it through the link in the description. And if you haven't already, subscribe. There's more to come. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, just because you're not alone doesn't mean you're being watched over.